5 things that turn 5 sensories off. Number 1, you didn't set in healthy boundaries. So the 5 sensory might have insulted you, they might have criticized your belief system, they might have tried to initiate intimacy too early. Whatever dastardly thing that they did, you didn't set a boundary, you didn't stand up for yourself in that moment. And when I mean stand up for yourself, I'm not talking about reacting or yelling or getting emotional and having a meltdown. What I mean is you very calmly stepped back to indicate to that 5 sensory that their behavior is not acceptable. And let's say one day has slipped by, something bad happened on a date, and you didn't quite catch it right away on the date, but the next day you think about it and then you pull back a little bit when they text. That's a good boundary too. So sometimes if you're a little bit late on the boundary, it's okay. You can still set in the boundary, but if you leave it too long, then you can't really set boundaries on stuff that happened ages ago. So you want to make sure you're paying attention moment to moment in order to set in the boundaries appropriately. If you're a little bit late, it's okay. But if you leave it too long, then it's like you're accepting the boundary. And that's one of the biggest mistakes 6 sensories make in their relationships with 5 sensories. They see the relationship through rose-tinted glasses, and especially if there has been an intimate act that's happened, it's almost like all the bad behavior gets swept under the rug and no one cares anymore. Then the next thing that turns 5 sensories off is that you've stopped committing to your life. So you've stopped committing to the hobbies that you once loved. You don't go to the writing club that you used to go to. You don't see your family and friends anymore. When you've stopped engaging in your life and you've started building your whole life around the 5 sensory, it's almost showing through your actions like you're worshiping the 5 sensory rather than you're worshiping the universe. And when you've lost that connection to life, to the universe, and all the different facets of your identity, that's when 5 sensories notice and they actually become turned off by your behavior. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that can cause a breakup that 6 sensories don't catch. It's like, I did everything right, I was cool, but you accidentally let too many things slide in your life. And a 5 sensory picked up on it, and that's why they're not attracted to you anymore. The next thing that turns 5 sensories off is if you're really negative about your past as a 6 sensory. 5 sensories are pretty aware nowadays that if you're complaining about exes or anything that happened to you in your past, that's a red flag, and they may take it as a golden ticket to behave badly with you. So you don't want to show that vulnerability. If the 5 sensory initiates it and they are a little bit vulnerable with you and share a personal story with you, you can share a little bit back. Having said that, be very careful with what you share because 5 sensories have a lot of games up in their minds, and whatever you share, be aware that they may turn it around on you as a game at some point in your relationship. So don't share anything that is too personal, too vulnerable with the 5 sensory, no matter how close you become, if you don't want that personal story turned around on you. My next tip that will turn 5 sensories off is if you start chasing them, if you initiate dates, if you're constantly texting first, if you're constantly calling first or asking for their attention or jumping up and down. The 5 sensories will notice that too, and they will become very turned off by this behavior. And they can be really tricky about this too. They may even ask you as a 6 sensory to behave this way. And you might think to yourself, oh, I'm doing what they asked me to do. I'm doing everything that people have required me to do. Yet, why are they not respecting me? Why are they not treating me the way that I deserve to be treated? And that's because people will tell you what they want you to do, but they don't always tell you what they need you to do. Do you see what I mean? So this is like a spoiled child asking for their 10th lollipop, okay? They've had enough, you know? And we don't realize that as a 6 sensory. We're not aware of the 5 sensories life. We can't always see into it, even though we're intuitive and we do have pretty good senses usually. When it comes to our personal lives, that's where we're the most blind. But if we could see into the life of a 5 sensory, we would realize that they've received a lot of attention, a lot of validation from other people like us in their past, and they've gotten a little bit spoiled with all the positive attention, and then they're not committing. they're bored. They're like, oh, I'm going to move on to the next adventure because it's more exciting than sticking around in this boring relationship. And so when you make things too comfortable for them by initiating first, you're feeding into their boredom. You're feeding into their laissez-faire attitude that stops them from really taking initiative and making a commitment to you. So you don't want to sabotage yourself by giving the 5 sensory too much positive attention. And it doesn't mean you have to give them negative attention either, because that also reinforces their bad behavior. But what you want to do instead is be a little bit more neutral, be a little bit more detached. Treat them cordially, have them in your life, do prioritize them when you can. But having said that, let them come to you and invest in you with their time and energy. Because for them, that's where the adventure lies. That's where their investment and their pleasure lies. And that's where they're most likely to fall in love with you as a 6th sensory, when you allow them the space to do things like that. And if you allow them that space and they don't follow up and they don't do things for you, then that's a sign that they're not in love with you. And it might be better to let them go, move on to the next person, and allow yourself to move on to the next person as well. The last piece of advice you may find a bit counterintuitive, and that is you don't want to agree with the 5 sensory on everything and constantly please them. Why? So by definition, 5 sensories and 6 sensories are different. The temptation is to try to get along with the 5 sensory and agree with them on everything, but they may have opinions that are quite different from yours. Maybe they support a different political figure. They may even belong to a different religion or a different culture than you do sometimes. They may have opinions about UFC or football, and you may know nothing about it as a 6th sensory, so don't pretend to agree to everything when you don't know about it or you don't appreciate it. Now, having said that, you don't want to hate all that stuff either. If you're hating on all that, you're also shooting yourself in the foot, because that may be where the 5 sensory spends time, and that may be places where you can develop your relationship. What you want to do instead is have the attitude of someone who is learning. Don't be too quick to agree with them, but don't disagree with them. Just have that open mind that you're willing to learn about their lives and adopt, but don't constantly go out of your way to please them, so to say.